Hello, everybody. We are going to read Act 1 of Henry V. Grab your book and we'll start in. The very first scene, Act 1, Scene 1, we are in, and it says, an antechamber of the king's palace. We're at the king's palace, King Henry V. But we're in a small room, a side room, and we have the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Bishop of Ely having a private conversation. Let's hear what they're talking about. Canterbury says, "My lord, I'll tell you that self-bill is urged, which in the 11th year of the last king's reign was like, and had indeed against us passed, but that the scambling and unquiet time did push it out of farther question." He says, okay, there is a bill being considered in the legislature. We don't know what it is yet, but he said, this is the same bill that the former king was trying to pass, and he would have passed, he says, against us. It would have passed against us if there hadn't been other problems going on. Ely says, but how, my lord, shall we resist it now? It must be thought on. If it pass against us, we lose the better half of our possession. For all the temporal lands which men devout by testament have given to the church, would they strip from us, being valued thus, as much as would maintain to the king's honour full 15 earls and 1,500 knights, 6,200 good esquires, and to relief of lazars and weak age of indigent faint souls past corporal toil, 100 almshouses right well supplied, and to the coffers of the king beside, 1,000 pounds by the year. Thus runs the bill. There's legislation afoot, apparently, that's going to take money from the church, quite a bit of money. He says, all the temporal lands which men devout by testament have given to us. Everybody who's left lands in their will to the church, this bill's going to strip it and use it for other purposes and also go into the king's treasury. These guys don't want to lose their money. This would drink deep. It would drink the cup and all. But what prevention? The king is full of grace and fair regard. Maybe we can just talk to the king. And a true lover of the Holy Church. Canterbury says, the courses of his youth promised it not. The breath no sooner left his father's body, but that his wildness, mortified in him, seemed to die too. Yea, at that very moment, consideration like an angel came and whipped the offending Adam out of him, leaving his body as a paradise to envelop and contain celestial spirits. Never was such a sudden scholar made, never came reformation in a flood, with such a heady currents scouring faults, nor never hydra-headed wilfulness so soon did lose his seat, and all at once, as in this king. You know, he used to be kind of wild, and the moment his dad died, he was completely reformed. He was like a different person. But when he was young, we never thought he would be full of grace and fair regard and a true lover of the Holy Church. Ely says, we are blessed in this change. Hear him but reason in divinity, and all admiring with an inward wish you would desire the king were made a prelate. If he talks on theology, you'd wish he were a priest. Hear him debate of commonwealth affairs, you would say it hath been in all his study. List his discourse of war, and you shall hear a fearful battle rendered you in music. Turn him to any cause of policy, the Gordian knot of it he will unloose, familiar as his garter, that, when he speaks, the air, a chartered libertine, is still, and the mute wonder lurketh in men's ears to steal his sweet and honeyed sentences, so that the art and practic part of life must be the mistress to this theoric, which is a wonder how his grace should glean it, since his addiction was to courses vain, his companies unlettered, rude, and shallow, his hours filled up with riots, banquets, sports, and never noted in him any study in any retirement, any sequestration from open haunts and popularity. You know, he knows something about everything. He can discourse on anything now. Where did he learn all this? He used to hang out with lowlifes. How did he get to be so good? Where did he learn this? Ely says, the strawberry grows underneath the nettle, and wholesome berries thrive and ripen best, neighbored by fruit of baser quality. And so the prince obscured his contemplation under the veil of wildness, which no doubt grew like the summer grass, fastest by night, unseen, yet crescive in his faculty. Just like plants can grow unseen under the ground, under the grass, under the straw laid on it. Strawberries grow under nettles. He grew in wisdom and kingliness in obscurity. Canterbury says, it must be so, for miracles are ceased, and therefore we must needs admit the means how things are perfected. Ely says, but my good lord, how now for the mitigation of this bill urged by the Commons? Doth his Majesty incline to it or no? He seems indifferent, or rather swaying more upon our part than cherishing the exhibitors against us. For I have made an offer to his Majesty upon our spiritual convocation and in regard of causes now in hand, which I have opened to his Grace at large, as touching France, to give a greater sum than ever at one time the clergy yet did to his predecessors part withal. I've been talking to Henry. I've offered him money as touching France. I've offered him money from the church if he wants to use it to attack France. And if we can get him to do that, this bill won't pass. Ely says, how did this offer seem received, my lord? With good acceptance of his Majesty, save that there was not time enough to hear, as I perceived his Grace would fain have done, the severals and unhidden passages of his true titles to some certain dukedoms, and generally to the crown and seat of France, derived from Edward, his great-grandfather. Right? He seemed to like what I was saying, but I didn't really have time to unpack it for him. I didn't have time to explain to him the claim he has a right to make to France. Ely says, what was the impediment that broke this off? The French ambassador upon that instant craved audience, and the hour, I think, is come to give him hearing. Is it 4 o'clock? It is. Oh, then go we in to know his embassy, which I could with a ready guess declare before the Frenchmen speak a word of it. I'll wait upon you, and I long to hear it. And they leave, and they go to the throne room, where we go in scene 2. So ambassadors from France have come, and it's time to give them an audience. But also, there's this lurking explanation. Why would Henry have a right to France? What is the bloodline? What are the legalities of this? So in scene 2, we move into the king's court room, his palace. And the king says, where is my gracious lord of Canterbury? Exeter says, not here in presence. Send for him, good uncle. Should we call the ambassador in, my liege? Not yet, my cousin. We would be resolved before we hear him of some things of weight that task our thoughts concerning us and France. Archbishop and the Bishop of Ely come in, and Canterbury says, God and his angels guard your sacred throne and make you long become it. The king says, sure, we thank you. My learned lord, we pray you to proceed and justly and religiously unfold why the law Salic that they have in France, or should not, bar us in our claim. And God forbid, my dear and faithful lord, that you should fashion, rest, or bow your reading, or nicely change your understanding soul with opening titles miscreant, whose right suits not in native colors with the truth. Archbishop, I want to know more about why you think the Salic law in France should allow me to be king of France or not. And now he's telling him, be careful. Don't make anything up. You better tell me the truth. For God doth know how many now in health shall drop their blood in approbation of what your reverence shall incite us to. If you incite us to war, a lot of deaths are going to follow. Therefore take heed how you impawn our person, how you awake the sleeping sword of war. We charge you in the name of God, take heed. For never two such kingdoms did contend without much fall of blood, whose guiltless drops are every one a woe, a sore complaint against him whose wrongs give edge unto the swords, that makes such waste in brief mortality. Under this conjuration speak, my lord, for we will hear, note, and believe in heart that what you speak is in your conscience, washed as pure as sin with baptism. Right? You need to be careful what you stir us up to, because bad things will happen if we go to war. They always happen in war. Now, I am going to read this enormous speech of Canterbury. Do not worry too much about following everything. He's trying to convince Henry that the Salic law in France, which says no one can come to the throne through the female side of the family, you can't inherit it through the female side, that this doesn't apply. And it's very convoluted, and that's the point. Canterbury says, oh, see, it's so clear. It's obvious. It's not obvious. So the way this argument is going to sound so complicated and convoluted, that's really what it sounds like. It's not that you don't understand. All right, here we go. Then hear me, gracious sovereign, and you peers that owe yourselves your lives and services to this imperial throne. There is no bar to make against your highness's claim to France, but this, which they produce from Pharamond. In terram salicam mulieres ne succedant. No woman shall succeed in Salic land, which Salic land the French unjustly gloss to be the realm of France, and Pharamond the founder of this law and female bar. Yet their own authors faithfully affirm that the land Salic is in Germany, between the floods of Sala and of Elbe, where Charles the Great, having subdued the Saxons, there left behind and settled certain French, who, holding in disdain the German women for some dishonest manners of their life, established then this law, to wit, no female should be inheritrix in Salic land, which Salic, as I said, twixt Elbe and Sala, is at this day in Germany called Meissen. Then doth it well appear the Salic law was not devised for the realm of France, nor did the French possess the Salic land until 421 years after defunction of King Pharamond. Idly suppose the founder of this law, who died within the year of our redemption, 426, and Charles the Great subdued the Saxons, and did seat the French beyond the river Sala, in the year 805. Besides, their writers say, King Pepin, which deposed Childeric, did, as the heir general, being descended of Blithild, which was daughter to King Clothaire, make claim and title to the crown of France. Hugh Capet also, who usurped the crown of Charles the Duke of Lorraine, sole heir male of the true line and stock of Charles the Great, to find his title with some shows of truth, though, in pure truth, it was corrupt and naught, conveyed himself as the heir to the Lady Lingar, daughter to Charlemagne, who was the son to Louis the Emperor, and Louis the son of Charles the Great. Also, King Louis the Tenth, who was sole heir to the usurper Capet, could not keep quiet in his conscience, wearing the crown of France, till satisfied that fair Queen Isabel, his grandmother, was lineal of the Lady Ermengar, daughter to Charles the aforesaid Duke of Lorraine. By the which marriage the line of Charles the Great was reunited to the crown of France. So that, as clear as is the summer sun, King Pepin's title and Hugh Capet's claim, King Louis his satisfaction, all appear to hold in right and title of the female. So do the kings of France unto this day. Howbeit, they would hold up this Salic law to bar your highness claiming from the female, and rather choose to hide them in a net than amply to embar their crooked titles usurped from you and your progenitors. All right. Henry knows this has been very complicated. He might not have even followed the whole thing, so he just asks a very simple question. May I, with right and conscience, make this claim? Canterbury says, the sin upon my head, dread sovereign, for in the book of Numbers is it writ, when the man dies, let the inheritance descend unto the daughter. Gracious Lord, stand for your own. Unwind your bloody flag. Look back into your mighty ancestors. Go, my dread lord, to your great-grandsire's tomb, from whom you claim. Invoke his warlike spirit, and your great uncles, Edward the Black Prince, who on the French ground played a tragedy, making defeat on the full power of France, whilst his most mighty father on a hill stood smiling to behold his lion's whelp forage in blood of French nobility. Oh, noble English, that could entertain with half their forces the full pride of France, and let another half stand laughing by, all out of work and cold for action. Remember your ancestors. Remember Edward the Black Prince. Remember all those English sovereigns that have brought bloody slaughter to France. Ely says, awake, remembrance of these valiant dead, and with your puissant arm renew their feats. You are the heir. You sit upon their throne. The blood and courage that renowned them runs in your veins, and my thrice puissant liege is in the very May morn of his youth, ripe for exploits and mighty enterprises. Exeter says, your brother kings and monarchs of the earth do all expect that you should rouse yourself, as did the former lions of your blood. Oh, all the rulers of neighboring countries expect you to rise to the occasion and be a warlike king. Westmoreland says, they know your grace hath cause, and means, and might. So hath your highness. Never king of England had nobles richer and more loyal subjects, whose hearts have left their bodies here in England and lie pavilioned in the fields of France. The hearts of your people are already camped in France on the battlefield. They're so excited about it. Canterbury says, oh, let their bodies follow, my dear liege, with blood and sword and fire to win your right. In aid whereof, we of the spirituality will raise your highness such a mighty sum as never did the clergy at one time bring in to any of your ancestors. We'll give you a boatload of cash if you'll attack France. The king says, we must not only arm to invade the French, but lay down our proportions to defend against the Scot, who will make road upon us with all advantages. Scotland and France were always in cahoots. And so the minute England would go to France, the Scottish army would invade from the north. And then they'd go back and have to fight them, and they'd leave France and go back and forth. And he says, well, we have to know that if we go to France, the Scottish are going to attack. Canterbury says, they of those marches, gracious sovereign, shall be a wall sufficient to defend our inland from the pilfering borders. The people living there, that's enough. They'll be a fine army to defend against Scotland. The king says, we do not mean the coursing snatchers only, but fear the main intendment of the Scot, who hath been still a giddy neighbor to us. For you shall read that my great-grandfather never went with his forces into France, but that the Scot on his unfurnished kingdom came pouring, like the tide into a breach, with ample and brim fullness of his force, galling the gleaned land with hot assays, girding with grievous siege castles and towns, that England, being empty of defence, hath shook and trembled at the ill neighbourhood. Every time we attack France, there are problems in the north of England. Canterbury says, she hath been then more feared than harmed, my liege. He says, no, it's not as bad as you think. It's never that bad. It's more just like mild alarms in northern England. It's not a worry. For hear her but exampled by herself, when all her chivalry hath been in France, and she a mourning widow of her nobles, she hath herself not only well defended, but taken and impounded as a stray the King of Scots, whom she did send to France to fill King Edward's fame with prisoner kings, and make her chronicle as rich with praise as is the ooze and bottom of the sea with sunken wrack and sumless treasuries. You know, not only has it not been that bad, but look in history and you'll find out that once upon a time they not only defended themselves, but they captured the King of Scotland. It's not a problem. Ely says, but there's a saying very old and true, if that you will France win, then with Scotland first begin. For once the eagle England being in prey to her unguarded nest, the weasel Scot comes sneaking, and so sucks her princely eggs, playing the mouse in absence of the cat, to tame and havoc more than she can eat. Ely says, well, the Scots do cause problems, but Exeter says it follows then that the cat must stay at home. If that always happens, then we can't ever leave England. We can't ever attack other countries. Yet that is but a crushed necessity, since we have locks to safeguard necessaries, and pretty traps to catch the petty thieves. while that the armed hand doth fight abroad, the advised head defends itself at home. For government, though high and low and lower, put into parts, doth keep in one consent, congreeing in a full and natural close, like music. Exeter is saying that we'll all work together. Basically, all the Englishmen will work together. Some will keep England safe, some will fight in France. Canterbury's going to take that theme and run with it. Therefore doth heaven divide the state of man in divers functions, setting endeavour in continual motion, to which is fixed as an aim or butt obedience. For so work the honeybees, creatures that by a rule in nature teach the active order to a peopled kingdom. They have a king, and officers of sorts, where some like magistrates correct at home, others like merchants venture trade abroad, others like soldiers, armed in their stings, make boot upon the summer's velvet buds, which pillage they with merry march bring home to the tent royal of their emperor, who, busied in his majesty, surveys the singing masons building roofs of gold, the civil citizens kneading up their honey, the poor mechanic porters crowding in their heavy burdens at his narrow gate, the sad-eyed justice, with his surly hum, delivering o'er to executors pale the lazy yawning drone. I this infer, that many things, having full reference to one consent, may work contrariously. It's like a hive. It's like bees. They all have different jobs, and they all work together, and they make a thriving hive. So will England. We've got enough people to stay in England and defend us. As many arrows loosed several ways come to one mark, as many ways meet in one town, as many fresh streams meet in one salt sea, as many lines close in the dial's center, a sundial, so may 1,000 actions, once afoot, end in one purpose, and be all well borne without defeat. Therefore, to France, my liege, divide your happy England into 4, whereof you take 1/4 into France, and you withal shall make all Gallia shake. If we, with thrice such powers left at home, cannot defend our own doors from the dog, let us be worried, and our nation lose the name of hardiness and policy. Just take 1/4 of our guys to France. You can whoop them with 1/4 of the guys. Leave 3/4 here. People not suitable for a campaign abroad. And if we can't defend ourselves from the Scots, just call us losers. The king says, call in the messengers sent from the Dauphin. The Dauphin is the Prince of France. And the attendants go off to get him. Now are we well resolved, the king continues, and by God's help and yours, the noble sinews of our power, France being ours, will bend it to our awe or break it all to pieces. Or there will sit, ruling in large and ample empery, or France and all her almost kingly dukedoms, or lay these bones in an unworthy urn, tombless, with no remembrance over them. I will take France, or you can just bury me unknown, worthless. Either our history shall with full mouth speak freely of our acts, or else our grave, like Turkish mute, shall have a tongueless mouth, not worshipped with a waxen epitaph. All right. The ambassador from France comes in. But Henry's still talking. Now are we well prepared to know the pleasure of our fair cousin Dauphin, for we hear your greeting is from him, not from the king. The ambassador says, may it please your majesty to give us leave freely to render what we have in charge, or shall we sparingly show you far off the Dauphin's meaning and our embassy? Do you want us to say exactly what the Dauphin wants us to say, or should we just give you a rough idea of his message? The king says, we are no tyrant, but a Christian king, unto whose grace our passion is as subject as is our wretches fettered in our prisons. Therefore, with frank and uncurbed plainness, tell us the Dauphin's mind. Speak your mind. Say exactly what he wants to say. We're not going to punish you for it. The ambassador says thus then in a few. Your highness, lately sending into France, did claim some certain dukedoms in the right of your great predecessor, King Edward III. In answer of which claim, The prince, our master, says that you savor too much of your youth, and bids you be advised there's naught in France that can be with a nimble galliard one. You cannot revel into dukedoms there. The Prince of France says, yeah, you can't dance and sing your way into the kingdom of France. You're asking for certain dukedoms. Yeah, I have yet to see that you have any ability to fight. We know you can sing and party. That's not going to get you very far here. He therefore sends you, meeter for your spirit, this ton of treasure, and in lieu of this desires you let the dukedoms that you claim hear no more of you. This the Dauphin speaks, and they present him with a casket, a box. This is the ton of treasure the Dauphin has sent. And Exeter goes over and sees what's inside. And King says, "What treasure, uncle?" "Tennis balls, my liege." The king says, "We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard." I love this part. He says, "Oh, since it's tennis balls, huh? Yeah, we'll play a tennis match. When we match our rackets to these balls, we'll play a set. We'll play a round of tennis, and it will knock his father's crown into the hazard, into the out of bounds. Tell him he hath made a match with such a wrangler that all the courts of France will be disturbed with chases. And we understand him well, how he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we made of them. We never valued this poor seat of England, and therefore, living hence, did give ourself to barbarous license, as 'tis ever common that men are merriest when they are from home. But tell the Dauphin, I will keep my state, be like a king, and show my sail of greatness when I do rouse me in my throne of France. For that I have laid by my majesty and plodded like a man for working days, but I will rise there with so full a glory that I will dazzle all the eyes of France, yea, strike the Dauphin blind to look on us. And tell the pleasant prince, this mock of his hath turned his balls to gunstones. Those tennis balls he sent me, he's turned them into cannon balls. And his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. For many a thousand widows shall this his mock out of their dear husbands, mock mothers from their sons, mock castles down. And some are yet ungotten and unborn that shall have cause to curse the Dauphin's scorn. But this lies all within the will of God, to whom I do appeal, and in whose name tell you the Dauphin, I am coming on to venge me as I may, and to put forth my rightful hand in a well-hallowed cause. So get you hence in peace, and tell the Dauphin his jest will savour but of shallow wit, when thousands weep more than did laugh at it. Convey them with safe conduct. Very well. They leave, and Exeter says, "This was a merry message." The king says, "We hope to make the cinder blush at it. Therefore, my lords, omit no happy hour that may give furtherance to our expedition, for we have now no thought in us but France, save those to God that run before our business. Therefore, let our proportions for these wars be soon collected, and all things thought upon that may with reasonable swiftness add more feathers to our wings. For, God before, will chide this Dauphin at his father's door. Therefore, let every man now task his thought, that this fair action may on foot be brought. Get ready, everybody. We are about to invade France, and the Dauphin is not going to be laughing anymore." All right, I'll see you for Act 2.